So I think we have enough stuff slapped on this thing. Welcome back to Lost Cause Ranch. Today we're playing with stuff that doesn't have radiators. A little bit out of the norm for here, especially since it's not even in a car. But don't you guys worry. As always, we also have broken Land Rovers to attend to. So quickly before we dive into this, we need to finish sorting out the budget LR4 from last video and spend a couple minutes getting that out of the way. So I guess since the budget LR4 is in here for that coolant leak, we may as well do some maintenance. Got the oil change done. Now we're gonna rotate the tires. Not sure what to do with these guys. The other thing I always like doing anytime I have the wheels off this guy is to retorque the wheel adapters. So this one has a 25mm spacer, so the steel wheels clear the bigger LR4 brakes. If you have an LR3, not required, but they do a little rubby on the LR4s. So these adapters bolt onto the factory studs and then have their own wheel studs that the wheel bolts onto. And I prefer these not to fall off, and they are often forgot about being, out of sight, out of mind. Tight, but you never know. So we're getting to the point of having to think about replacing these tires. They're not bad, just got a little more edge wear than I like. I think I have about 18,000 miles on these. They still probably have another 7 or so before I need to replace them. Kind of the nature of the beast on the LR3 and LR4. When you lift them with lift rods tricking the air suspension, it kind of throws the geometry out of whack. This did get an alignment after that, but with the variation of the height of the air ride, seems to chew through some of these tires a little quicker. My only dilemma is I'm not sure which way I want to go with them. These are 275, 65 18s. General Grabber AT's been super happy with them, but I almost want to go to like a true 33 inch. But that's going to require either more cutting, plastics up front, frame horn in the rear, or figuring out control arms to correct geometry. I'd like to get a little more lift out of it. Wonder if we did something for a lower control arm. Things to think about. I suppose since we have the pressure bleeder out from the Eco Challenge, we may as well flush the brake fluid on this one too. Someone's happy that spring has finally showed up. She's back to getting to hang out in the shop again. Who wouldn't want a fresh air nap? So this engine belongs to a friend of mine, and it's going in a neat little VW project that he has. So today's project is to see if we can get this guy checked over, fired up, running, and ready to hang in the back of that thing. Well, let me rephrase that. It's not a Volkswagen thing, but it is kind of close. So when he acquired this, it was already sitting on this neat little starter stand. Got a little button, red light, battery tray, and I was able to find a fuel tank for it. So if I can sort through some of this mess, we should be able to fire it up on the stand. We only got 2 problems. I'm not exactly an air-cooled Volkswagen guy, and the gentleman who previously owned this engine and hung it on this starter stand, and I'm assuming did some of the modifications, is no longer with us. This is from that same large collection of Volkswagen parts that I ended up with. So unfortunately, we are unable to talk to him and see what he had going on, which means we're going to get thrown into the fire and have a quick education on Type 1 Volkswagen. I don't even know what this is. It's a dual port air-cooled Volkswagen engine. Is that Type 3? You'll have to let me know. Most I've ever messed with on these is I adjusted the valves on my Porsche 914, which had what looks to be a similar engine. But since I have no real history on this guy, and it has some modifications, including a degree wheel here, electronic ignition, and either a remote oil cooler or oil filter, and an extended oil pan, we're gonna take the valve covers off and get a closer look, trying to determine what we got going on. Without any history on it, I don't want to just throw some oil in it and try and fire it up and do some damage. I'm hoping we don't have to go as far as splitting the case, because I don't want to learn how to do that today. But if we have to, I will. The nice thing is we do have an assortment of parts that came with the engine, so I think we should be able to accomplish something. And worst case scenario, I still have a ton of parts too. So the name of the game on these things is kind of simplicity. It's kind of nice it's air cooled, so we don't have to come up with a radiator setup on the starter stand to fire it up and run it. And then to take a peek under the valve covers, we don't even have to unbolt them. It's got updated rubber valve cover gaskets, which is nice. Everything looks clean so far. So we're gonna find top dead center. Obviously the wheel is marked, but it's a 4-stroke engine, so we gotta make sure we're on the right stroke and not 180 off. And what's nice there is it seems like we got some good compression. The cylinder heads look super clean and fresh, so that is great news. Now that we got the engine at top dead center, right there, off the split in the case, we're gonna start with setting the valves, and that's just gonna involve a wrench and our feeler gauges, and we can adjust on our rocker arm right here. So we're aiming for 6/1000ths of an inch of clearance between the tappet and the valve. This seems like it's a touch loose. Slides in there a little too easily. Let's check it here. Looks like we have about 8/1000ths right now, so we'll tighten these up. After this runs in and everything, we're gonna have to readjust them anyways, but may as well get them where they're supposed to be to begin with. Find the one we need again. I guess we need a flat blade too. So right about there. I like that. Move on to the next one, I guess. This thing would be a load easier to turn if you could get a freaking socket on it. I'm guessing there was some customization to a socket done here. That guy is tight. Curious how that got cranked down. Next thing, I'm going to check out what we have going on for an oil filter situation. This one is actually what I believe an aftermarket block. You guys who know, let me know. But it has the extended sump pan. Factory engine doesn't have this. It would just run the engine case itself there, and then the oil filter would be up in there. So I just want to see what is going on here. Dry. All right, we got nothing in there. No oil filter or anything. So I'm guessing he had it set up for an external oil filter. So I think with our little cursory inspection, that this little engine is good enough for us to attempt to start. Whether that's a great idea, you'll find out with me here in a few minutes. Now we just need to start assembling things, because without things, it's not gonna run. We're gonna try and guess order of operations here. I'm assuming some of the fan cooling tins need to go first because they're underneath everything. Might be hard to sneak them in otherwise. If I would have had these on earlier, I wouldn't have had to Google which cylinder is where. They're nice enough to just tell you. Well, that was a smooth move. Well, at least it was easy to get out. Try not to drop it this time. I'll have to say I do enjoy the simplicity of these things. These probably aren't the tins that will ultimately be run on this particular engine, but they'll work perfectly for this setup. These are closed bay tins to get combined with the rest of these, and something like a Beetle surround the entire engine bay and seal it off. This particular vehicle is going to have an open engine bay, so it'll be just running this upper fan shroud, the cylinder head covers that would be trimmed and extended down, but open underneath. But like I said, this will work perfectly for starting it up. And if you aren't familiar with these, wait until you see the cooling fan setup. It's just so cute how it all is packaged. Not very complicated, simple. I just didn't want to keep saying simple. if you play with a lot of stuff like we do around here, one thing I suggest, and it doesn't even cost a whole lot of money, is to set yourself up with an assortment of hardware of various sizes that are common in your use. We got some serrated flange nuts, regular flange nuts of different sizes, some flange bolts. It's just nice to go to the bin and have something that will look good on the engine. Really helps make everything you're doing look a little more professional. So back to that order of operations. Mess something up. Thinking maybe pull this off. Don't actually know which direction this goes in. We'll go with wiring up. See if we can slip that on now. Perfect. To show you just how little I know about these guys, I was trying to figure out what that little strap was for when the generator was sitting in the box. But that's how we secure it onto the little stand there. And you do note it has bad regulator written on it. Back to that whole we don't know exactly what is going on. So I am going to assume it's got a bad regulator, but we will confirm that ourselves. But it was nice that he wrote some notes here, including we have what jets are in the carb. That makes life a tad bit easier. I don't know if those jets will get us in the ballpark, but it is nice to know what's in there. So if we cover that bad regulator note up, does it still have a bad regulator or did we just fix it? All fixed. So back to that simplicity. This thing has one belt running one thing. From the crank to the generator, and that generator runs our cooling fan, which then uses the shroud to blow air over our oil cooler and also down to the cylinder heads and cylinders that have cooling fins. There's just nothing to these guys. I mean, it is old technology, but it is still cool to play with. Can I do it by hand? Not strong enough to do a lot of things, but strong enough to do that. We obviously know where this one goes. Let's take our long ones. This should be 1 and 2. So I think those are in the right order. No, they are. But now those obviously aren't routed and tied. After firing this thing up and before it goes in the vehicle, we're going to throw a new set of spark plug wires on and a new set of plugs in it. But we're getting close. I just need to sit down and figure out some wiring now. There's not a ton, and I could probably sort it out without looking, but I figured there's enough info on the interwebs that I'll just take a peek. So we need our 12-volt wiring for everything, including our electronic ignition on the distributor. Then we're going to loop the oil feed in return for now and figure out our fuel lines. I suppose we should probably put some oil in it too. Probably wouldn't be great to junk the thing by forgetting that. So just whip this guy up on the laser. This is just a little side project. A group of us are working on clarifying some trails at a local state park, and we're going to be doing some paint blazes on trees, color-coded for the trail so people don't get lost. So just whipped out this little handheld stencil that we can use to spray the marks, because we always got to look as professional as possible, and then we'll be able to hang them. But we're going to make sure this size and shape works for everyone. And then we'll bust out a few more, that way we can divide and conquer. I don't know, we're probably going to mark a little over 10 miles worth of trails, so splitting it up would be helpful. Should leak a little less oil now. If you don't have one of these, a ratcheting hose cutter is the third best invention ever. But we're going to throw a fuel filter in line here. So the belt system is a little different than I'm used to. On the generator, we have a 2-piece pulley. I guess we throw the belt up, then put the pulley on like that. But we also have a pile of shims, and we kind of set the pulley depth with those. We're going to try that. So I think we have enough stuff slapped on this thing to attempt to fire it up. Got all these crazy clips that we're gonna hook up to the battery. We got our go button. We're not gonna worry about the generator just yet. We'll be able to fire it up and run it without that. Hopefully the belt doesn't fly off. Come on, guys, you almost let me forget to put oil in the thing. Would have been a disaster. Now, I have no clue how much oil this actually takes. If I remember correctly, the last Beetle we changed oil on was like 2.5 quarts or something ridiculously small like that. But I imagine this holds like 1.5 quarts or better. Good thing it's not a modern vehicle and we have an actual physical dipstick. We're just going to throw some old school 10W30 dyno oil in. This is just going to get ran in, started, make sure everything goes, and that'll all get dumped. And we'll hook up the remote oil cooler and everything and get fresh. Probably go with like a 20W50 Valvoline VR1 racing oil. That worked well on my 914. I was wrong. 5.5 quarts. Oh, jeez. I think I got more on it than in it. We'll clean that up. We'll hook up some juice. Let's hit the switch. See if it turns. Nice. Well, that is a good sound. A little loud with no real exhaust. Maybe we'll put an exhaust on it. We didn't even have to get the ether bunny out. Who'd have thought the exhaust would be hot? More duct tape. You know, this is like my favorite. The opposite of that. My least favorite kind of tape. Just leaves frickin' residue on everything. Wrong side. But now, we gotta get this on stuck. I assure you this is the correct way to do this. Don't worry, this is not the exhaust that will be getting used on this thing. We'll probably end up making something cool. Look at the freaking junk that just came out of it. Shoot, I think we got somewhere. We're gonna have to dial the timing in a little bit. But it fires up, sounds half decent. It's a little more reasonable with the exhaust on it. Still a tiny loud. So we went ahead and wasted some time fiddling around, fixing the important things in life. The light now lights up when you start it. It's the little things that make you happy. All right, so what we're gonna do now is kind of roughly dial in the timing. We got a degree wheel here. I went ahead and unhooked the vacuum advance, plugged that vacuum hole with a screw. So there's probably a lot of you who have never messed with a timing light. This is a before my time type of tool. This thing is probably older than me. But this is how they set timing back in the day. It wasn't done via a computer. So we're gonna go ahead and hook this up to the battery. Then our little reference sensor thingamabobber goes around the #1 spark plug wire. And this is going to help us set the timing because that guy is going to fire this light when that spark plug is firing. And then this thing has a fancy degree wheel on it, so we'll be able to dial in the timing pretty well. We go off the split in the crankcase. Let's fire it up and see what we got going on. So from what I have read with this particular setup, we are aiming for 7.5 degrees before top dead center, which would be right here. That is set without the vacuum actuator. This guy right here, hooked up and at idle. close enough in the ballpark to where I'm going to start playing with the carb because it'd be nice to just have the thing idle. So we're going to put the carb back to initial settings. First thing we're going to do is bottom the bypass screw out, and then we go 2.5 out from there. So that's half, 1, half, 2, half. We're going to do the same to the volume screw, which is beneath it. Half, 1, half, 2, half. To be honest, that's the first time I have ever ran an engine outside of a vehicle. That's kind of fun. We should do that more often. We now have this close enough to get it installed in the car. At that point, we'll dial the rest of it in because we're going to have an intake on it, a different exhaust. So there is no sense in tuning the carb without that stuff and having to change it once that's all different. So we will call that a major success. And the gentleman who had this engine before did a nice job putting it all together because it never came apart. It was interesting coming into this because we weren't sure if it was out of the car because it was broken or on the fixed side of broken. You usually don't remove an engine for no reason. Thankfully, it was all good to go and no major issues. I think my friend's gonna have some fun with this one. Sounds healthy. It's big, and I don't want to hit anything. The videos lately seem to be running in streaks of themes. Today's theme, setting timing. So once again, we got the timing light out, and we're finally gonna dial in the timing on the Range Rover Camper. I haven't really driven this thing, drove this thing. I don't know which is the correct way to say that, driven or drove. But I haven't done that since we replaced the chewed up oil pump gear. And we had some wear on that a little bit there. This new guy is nice and tight. And in that process, pulling the front cover off, remove the distributor, and the timing isn't 100% dialed in. You may see that it is running a tad rich because of that. So being I snagged the timing light from Ted for the VW engine, no time better than the present. I'm not the tallest guy I've ever met, so we need some assistance. Feels pretty good. You can kind of see what we're aiming for down there. I think we'll call that good for now. Starts right back up. Make sure I lock the distributor back down so it's not variable timing. You think we had a little extra fuel in it? This isn't the only one we have to move today. Got one more to move, gonna require that. You would think the thing would roll downhill. What do you think, Sasha? You cold? fucking pig. It's real easy to turn too. That's good enough for now. Man, having a winch sure is nice when you own nothing but broken stuff. This $300 Amazon winch has been worth more than its weight in gold. That Touareg, the one with the V10 diesel, it's a frickin' sow. I think someone's over it. You ready to go inside yet? We had to move the Touareg before it became a fixture of the earth. It's been sitting there next to the Risco Disco axles for quite some time. So why'd we bother digging it out of the hole there? Well, it's about time we clean some stuff up around here. And this guy, we're gonna start parting it out. Or I think you guys in the UK say breaking, but it's been broken, so parting it out. So if any of you guys need first gen Touareg parts, I have some available, but shortly we're gonna roll this guy right into the shop door. It's nice and set up to do that under its own weight. There is one thing that drew this to me when I bought it, and it is a reason why I own it, and that part of the Touareg is gonna stay here. Yep, we're gonna hang on to the V10 twin turbo diesel for a future project. It's just not gonna be in a Touareg. And then now that it is nice out, we pulled the camper out of the woods where it was stored for winter. I mean, it wasn't in the woods. You saw where it was. Because with the weather now cooperating, we can tear into the inside of the camper. We're gonna go ahead and remove the 70s and fix it up a little bit and make it a tad more livable. Maybe we'll just move into it someday. So we had a fun, productive day. Got some stuff moved around. It'll be nice to have some stuff cleaned up and out of here. It's getting a little ridiculous with how much I've been collecting. With that being said, appreciate you guys watching, appreciate you subscribing, and we will catch you on the next one. It's gonna be back to having radiators, not stuff like this.